what made this the natural next step in follow up to the color of law?
Well, I actually started The Color of Law because I was an education policy writer. I didn't know much about the housing policy at the time I wrote it. I read in 2007 the Supreme Court decision that prohibited Louisville and Seattle from embarking on a very trivial school desegregation plan using choice to desegregate schools. And the Supreme Court prohibited them from doing it because it said that the schools in Louisville and Seattle were segregated because the neighborhoods in which they were located were segregated. And those neighborhoods were segregated just by accident because of people wanting to live with each other of the same race, or because of private discrimination, or homeowners or landlords not willing to sell to African Americans in particular in white neighborhoods. It called this de facto segregation, and it said where segregation happened by accident, it can only be undone by accident, and school districts are not permitted to take explicit action to desegregate. Well, I read that decision. I thought it was nonsense. As I said, it was based on Louisville and Kentucky and Seattle, Washington. And I remember reading, and this is just one example, reading about an incident in Louisville, Kentucky, where a white homeowner sold a home in his suburban neighborhood to a black family. And the white homeowner was eventually arrested, tried, convicted, and jailed with a 15-year jail sentence for sedition for having done so. And I said to myself, this is not de facto segregation. I began to look into it further, and The Color of Law documented many, many federal, state, and local policies that were designed to ensure that we be a racially segregated society. And this is what's caused our school segregation, because schools are located in segregated neighborhoods. Well, The Color of Law was a history book. It was not written for historians. It was written for a general audience, but explained this history of how our government segregated the country. And people who read it, and I gave many talks like this on webinars and went around the country talking about it, they always had a similar reaction. They said, well, what can we do about it now? And I got tired of hearing that question. So I recruited Leah to help me write a sequel called Just Action about what we can do about it now. The assumption of Just Action is that although federal policy is primarily responsible for the residential segregation that we know everywhere in the country, once you have segregation, as we have today, it's sustained and reinforced by local policy. And although there's no national will now to take significant federal action to desegregate neighborhoods, there are so many things that we can do in our own communities to make a significant dent in the segregation that exists that could lead eventually to federal policy. But the place to start is local. So we wrote this book, Just Action, to answer the question that people ask, what can we do about it? 20 million people participated in Black Lives Matter demonstrations in 2020. They were white and black, urban and suburban, low income and middle class. They participated in those demonstrations. Many of them then went home and put Black Lives Matter signs on their lawns, but did nothing further. Leah and I thought that this indicated there was an enormous base of support for racial justice. And the problem was that the people who participated in those demonstrations, and of course, if 20 million participated, there were many millions more who were like them. They just didn't know what to do. So we wrote this book to give them some ideas of things that they could do in their local communities.